Eswatini Talks. This is the name of our brand new podcast, which will be carried out throughout 2025. This very first episode, though, being broadcast to you on International Human Rights Day, live from the offices of the National Human Rights Commission in the Kingdom of Eswatini, is a very important one. And it comes at the time when Eswatini is trying to find its feet in terms of civic rights. It's trying to find its feet in terms of freedom of expression. I'm so delighted today to be joined by the Deputy Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission right here in the Kingdom of Eswatini, Ms. Duduzile Dlamini Nhlengetwa, who is actually joined by Nelisi Wezwane and Mlondi Ntsibande. We will be having a very wide-ranging conversation around what is the importance of the NHRI, the National Human Rights Institution in this country, but most importantly, we will touch on what are your human rights as a citizen of Eswatini. What are your roles? What are your responsibilities? But also, what are your limitations? We will then segue into civic rights. We will talk about your rights as an NGO. We'll talk about your rights as an activist. After that, we will talk about something so fundamental, active citizenship. We will talk about how do you make sure that you are engaging in all of the democratic processes that are actually frameworked within our constitution and the various legislation that we have. But before we go any further, I'd like to introduce you to the Commissioner, the Deputy Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission, Ms. Duduzile. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us. We are excited as the Commission on Human Rights and Public Administration, stroke integrity, to be part of this exciting podcast.
Yes, we are also happy to have you, and I love the fact that you've actually named the entire institution. I only just called it the Human Rights Commission. Mr. Ntsibande, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Melusi, for having us in this podcast, whereby we are going to be having conversations on human rights, which I believe are entitlements to each and everyone here in Eswatini and around the world. And this entitlement, we do have them by virtue of the fact that we are human beings.
And born.
Yes, within them.
Yes. Ms. Nelly, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Melusi. Thank you. How are you?
Could never be better. Blessed and highly favored. You know, let's get into it. Let's talk about human rights. Let's talk about the responsibilities. I'll start with you, Deputy Commissioner. Let's start first, though, about the Commission, the institution that we're sitting at today. What is this institution? What does it mean? Where does it come from? And why is it so important for us to have it?
Okay, thank you, Melusi. The Commission on Human Rights and Public Administration stroke integrity is a constitutional body. It is a creature of the Constitution under Section 163 of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Eswatini. Eswatini is part of the global community. We are part of the United Nations. So we actually committed to the journey of human rights following the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and we have had several protocols and treaties that we ascribe to as a country. Human rights generally are the role of states. States have the duty to protect their citizens. And as a result, it then became apparent that we have a whole chapter in the Constitution that talks about the fundamental human rights of the people of Eswatini. So at a global space, besides the protocols and the charters, we also have what we call Paris Principles. Paris Principles are actually compelling states to have a national human rights institutions, acts of parliament that will actually make sure that states are obliged to fund national human rights institutions. They are also ensure that the mandate is broad-based. It's not limited to certain things, but the general protection and of rights and freedoms of the people of that particular country. They're also ensuring that as a Human Rights Commission, we are accessible as we are. We are in Mbabane, which is
Capital.
The capital of the country, but we intend to decentralize because we are a country where we have Tengula, where we have to be where the people are. And also we must cater for multiple people. There must be pluralism in our actions, and there must be cooperation. In your introduction, you spoke about the role of the civic society. We must make sure that as human rights defenders, they also are there because they serve a very important role in terms of ensuring that they assist the Commission, they assist government to reach out to where we cannot reach at the grassroots level.
Two things, Deputy Commissioner. You talk about the Paris Principles, and then you talk about our Constitution, Section 163. Our Constitution is almost 20 years. It's a very new baby. It's now an adult, our Constitution. Would you say, as a Commission, you are in the right track in terms of promoting and safeguarding? Talk to me basically about what you find your role to be working with these different groups that you've just talked about.
Yes, the Constitution itself was birthed in 2005, and as a Commission we started working in 2009, and I can safely say that as a Commission there's been some advancements in terms of the protection and the promotion of human rights. The major part of the work that we've done as a Commission is the issue of promoting human rights. And that would come in the sense that we train, we advocate about issues of human rights. We make people aware that they have their rights and they've got their own responsibility as individuals. And we've used various platforms, media platforms. We've used the radio, we've used television, and also we have social media presence. We are on Facebook, still working on X, but we are available and accessible. Yes.
I love that, and I love the fact that you're talking about making sure that we, more than anything, decentralize. I remember the decentralization policy being one the government has been on the drive of from as long ago as during the time of the then Deputy Prime Minister Constance Simelane. I want to talk to you then, Nelly, about because now we understand what this institution is and what its role is. I just want to understand from your perspective, what are these human rights that this institution is trying to speak to the communities about? What are they? What are the citizens' responsibilities? What are the limitations? What is the role of every citizen in ensuring that they understand what these human rights are?
Thank you, Melissa, for the opportunity. Maybe I will start by building on what the Commissioner has said in terms of the Paris Principles, which actually are benchmarks for establishing an effective national human rights institution. This includes the National Human Rights Institution should have a broad mandate, which is the promotion and protection mandate, and it involves also the composition of the Commission, which requires that there should be pluralism in terms of the appointment of the commissioners, and also it includes autonomy, that the Commission should be autonomous and be independent from any interference. And then it also includes adequate resources, that the Commission should be adequately resourced by government. And also it includes issues of accessibility, like the Commissioner has alluded to earlier in her presentation, that it means the Commission should be accessible to the public. So she mentioned issues of decentralization, which can make us even more accessible to the public than we are. And it also includes issues of the establishment of the Commission in terms of the structure, the framework that establishes the Commission. And in our case, we are a constitutional body, like the Commissioner has said. So going on to human rights, I think Mr. Sibanza earlier on touched a bit on human rights, that it's something that we are born with. It's actually entitlements that accrue to us as human beings by virtue of being human. You are born with them. You never purchase them. Either you are rich or poor, born from the rural setup or community, or urban, you have human rights. Young and old, you have human rights. So it's actually entitlements that...
Even if I'm from Slangan.
Of course.
Just check.
So, human rights have got characteristics, basically about 5. And this includes the universality, meaning they're universal, they're everywhere. Even when you're in Eswatini, you have human rights. You cross to the nearest country, South Africa, you still are entitled to your human rights by virtue of being human. They are also indivisible. You cannot divide them into order of importance. They are equally important. Your civil and political rights are as important as your social and economic rights. Also, they are interdependent, meaning they depend on each other. My right to life depends on my right to health, and my right to education depends on my right to life. My right to work depends on my right to education. So they are interdependent. That is why normally we say once you violate a certain person's rights, you should know that you have actually not violated one right, but a plethora of those rights. And also, human rights are inalienable, meaning you cannot just do away with them. You cannot sell them. You cannot actually pay your debts with them. So if I owe you money, you cannot then take away my rights just because I owe you. You just have to take.
But what about my rights to get my money back?
Yes, there are actually mechanisms that can give you redress. You can go to court and claim your.
And I can also come to the Human Rights Commission.
Not necessarily. And also there are inherent, meaning it's something that we come with by birth. We get them when we are born. So that is human rights. Again, these human rights, they actually are conferred by instruments. The first instrument that conferred human rights to human beings was the UDHR, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which is the first document that conferred human rights to human beings. I think after the Second World War, which was in 1945. It is actually a document that actually promotes issues of equality, non-discrimination, and the dignity of human beings or of human life. But thereafter, there have been so many instruments that have been actually established and promulgated to promote human rights. These include the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, your Covenant on Socio-Economic Rights, and a lot of other instruments. But basically, they all draw from the UDHR. Maybe one may need to emphasize that these instruments do not give us the human rights. Like I said, we are born with them. It's an entitlement that we have by birth. It's just that they confer them, they emphasize them, and give us guidance on how to enjoy those rights and what are those rights people that may not even know about. So the instruments are there to guide us. So there's the instruments, the civil and political rights, they just confer the civil and political rights. The Covenant on Socio-Economic again confers socio-economic rights. The CEDAW also, which confers rights to women. So there are different categories, and also CAT. You have your CRC, which confers rights to children. I think this was done in particular to protect those specific groups of people or those specific rights of people, so that people are clear on what rights they have and how they can claim them or enjoy them.
Right. Just on that, I want to go to Nsibande, because you talk about these sort of treaties, for lack of a better word, the convention, the covenants even. You talk about socio-economic rights, you talk about CEDAW, CAT, the ICCPR, the CRC. I want to come to you, Nsibande, about how then do we as citizens make sure that, I mean, of course, the country is already making sure that it aligns to these conventions because we have an institution like this one. But what more could we do as citizens to make sure, and what sort of mechanisms are there available for us as citizens, as NGOs, as everyone who's interested in these rights, to make sure that our states are actually aligning to it and are actually being, transparent and accountable to it?
Okay, thank you, Melusi, for the question. Maybe the starting point would be that because we're talking about human rights, maybe the first point that I want to emphasize on is that once the country, maybe for instance Eswatini, has ratified these human rights treaties, the first step is for Eswatini, in partnership with civil society organizations, to do some awareness raising campaigns as well as to conduct education activities to various treaty barriers as well as the population at large, so that they can be well aware of what is expected of them, what are their entitlements, and when they are exercising or enjoying those rights, what are their corresponding obligations. That's the starting point. After that, yes, Commissioner as well as they did mention that the government of Eswatini, there are a number of institutions that have been established to safeguard the promotion, protection, as well as the fulfillment of these rights that we are talking about. So I'm not going to talk much about the Commission on Human Rights and Public Administration. So there is another aspect or another institution that the government established, I think, early in the 2020s. So this institution, it seeks to monitor the implementation of the human rights conventions or treaties, as well as doing some periodic reporting on the progress that the country has made to advance those human rights. So here, let's start on the implementation part. So on the implementation, so we know that the government is obligated to create an environment that is conducive for those rights to be enjoyed by the people. So here, the government is expected to do some legislative enactments. It means that it has to pass law. So we know that Eswatini is a dualist, meaning that the ratification or accession of those human rights treaties alone is not enough. So the government has to put those, the contents of those treaties into the context of Eswatini. So we call that process domestication.
Right.
That's when the laws are enacted.
Right.
So
could this, as an example, be the enactment of the Child's Act?
Yes. So
the SODV Act?
Yes, it is. I'll make an example of the Convention on the Rights of Children. So there in 2012, the government of Eswatini enacted the Children Protection and Welfare Act number 6 of 2012. So it didn't end there. Then it went on to put in place some institutions that are going to be monitoring the implementation of those rights that are in the Children Protection and Welfare Act. I will also make an example of a case of domestication. There is this Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So in 2018, the government enacted this piece of legislation. It's called the Persons with Disabilities Act. So there, that particular piece of legislation is still in the process of being implemented. So now we know that there is that governing structure, the advisory council, that the government has made. So going forward, after those policies have been made by the government, after those legislative enactments have been made, the government now has to do some administrative measures. So the government normally do these administrative measures by making some policies and some maybe development plans that are capturing or expanding on the particular provisions of the rights that are in those treaties. Then maybe the third aspect of the obligation on the implementation aspect is that the court should set up some courts. So we know that Eswatini, it does have the High Court, the Supreme Court, as well as the subordinate courts that will provide as a forum whereby if there are any disputes or if there are any violation of those human rights, the citizens are going to have some avenues to approach the court.
Okay, so you are saying when all of these treaties have been ratified by the country and the laws have been enacted and there is policy, there is implementation of these laws, and if I as a citizen feel like one of these provisions, either through the legislation or the constitution or these international provisions, have been violated, or I'm unhappy about the implementation of such, I must go to court?
Yes, specifically there is section 35 of the constitution, which empowers every individual or association to approach the High Court in a case whereby maybe a certain people's rights have been violated or they are about to be violated. So we do have those venues. Then on the part whereby the government now has this obligation to periodically report on the implementation of these human rights principles or provisions. So the government established within the Ministry of Justice, there is this unit, it's called the National Mechanism for Reporting and Follow-up. So its main mandate is to coordinate the processes of preparing state report under the various treaties on the progress that the country has made to advance those particular human rights. After those reports have been submitted to treaty bodies and a constructive dialogue has been undertaken, then the treaty bodies, they issue recommendations. So it is part of the mandate of the NMRF, we call it that. Yeah, there's this acronym. It is the mandate of the NMRF in partnership with other organizations like the CSOs as well as the Commission on Human Rights to follow up on the implementation of those recommendations.
So would you say the NMRF is a sort of a mechanism for the state alone? Is there space for civil society to engage?
Okay, by its configuration, so the primary or maybe let's say the principal members that are, because it works as a committee, it's an interministerial, it uses an interministerial model. So there, the members of various government ministries and departments that are being treated by us, they serve in that committee. So I'll make an example. If under the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, now the Eswatini report is due. So this interministerial committee will select a working committee that is going to be spearheading the process of drafting that particular report. Then once a zero draft of that report has been developed, then it is when civil society organizations are invited to make contributions on what should be constituted on the report. So what I should also point out at this point is that when the NMRF is preparing the state reports, they normally follow some reporting guidelines so that the quality and the substance of the report is good. So we normally prepare those reports using.
Right. This is a very good opening to our conversation, and I want to come back to you, Deputy Commissioner, particularly because I think we've heard about what exactly are these human rights, what are our responsibilities, and I'm happy that we have the Commission, we have the NMRF for us as activists, as civil society, as citizens to engage in ensuring that our rights are being implemented. But I want to speak about something so controversial, which is the limitation of the rights, and I want you, Deputy Commissioner, to walk us through that, because it's all so good and nice. It's all roses and flowers, and it's honey and milk when you talk about all my rights this, all my rights that. But oftentimes we forget that these rights, yes, they bear responsibility with them, but most importantly, there are limitations to it. And it goes back to what Nelu was saying about the money that she owes me. So talk to us, Deputy Commissioner, about these limitations of human rights in our context.
Okay. Thank you very much, Melusi. Maybe let me start this conversation by saying that, yes, Nene said nice things about human rights, why that everybody does have human rights, and they're born with these human rights. So basically, the limitation would come in the form that your human rights should not really have a negative bearing on the next person, which means that as I'm enjoying my right, I must not step onto someone's toes. I'll just make an example. As you are enjoying your freedom of speech, it should not come to hate speech. It shouldn't. I shouldn't really feel insulted as a person. So you are good as expressing how you feel, but whatever you feel must not really affect me in the negative sense that I really feel that I am now being violated. So that's the limitations and limitation. And states have actually come out with certain legislations, for instance, to ensure that there is fair play, freedom let's say, association. For instance, you want to go on a strike, and there's the Public Order Act that actually says you can exercise that right as a union, as a federation, depending whoever is going to be exercising that right. But in the process, make sure that there is no violation of other people's property. And sometimes you want to undertake a march. So it means that you must then talk to the people that may be affected, the stakeholders, and engage with them. There's also the law enforcement agencies, and also, let's say, the municipalities, which, because it's not going to happen in a vacuum, it's going to happen in a particular geographic space. So the people that are controlling that space must know what's going to be happening, and then we will then look at a suitable, the Public Order Act says, find a suitable way that is actually going to ensure that you exercise your right. But in that process, you are not actually infringing other people's rights. Then there's a huge traffic block, and people can't move, and because you are expressing some dissatisfaction about certain things, then you think it's right or it's proper for me to start using stones and destroying other people's property. And if it's your employer, you start banning certain parts of the building, and that talks to issues like the Industrial Relations Act or Employment Act. The Industrial Relations Act itself will give you the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and freedom of participation, but with limitations.
Right.
It's not just going to give it to you on their unlimited rights. So
it's not carte blanche.
It's not carte blanche. Yes, that's a perfect one.
Yeah. I want for us to speak a little bit about, we live in a digital era. We're on a podcast right now, which is going to be carried on various social media platforms. And as a country, we just have the new Cyber Crimes Prevention Act. Can you talk to us about the application of that law in terms of protecting, first, my right to express myself, which I have a right to say what I think online, and perhaps what could be the limit there in terms of what I can say or cannot say, particularly on the right to express, maybe not just so much online, but on the everyday, happenings of our lives.
Okay. My colleagues will have to come in on that one, but okay, let me just say, talk specifically on issue of social media. Social media is a very good instrument. It's there. It helps us to connect, and in fact, as a Human Rights Commission, we are actually calling for for people to be able to express themselves, to have the right to information, but also we're just talking about limitations, that it is not everything that is safe for public consumption. The state security measures that the state has to, state secrets that do not have to go out there. So we have seen where you'd find that an official public document is in the public space and it's not from the originator. So sometimes that would actually, as a commission, makes us feel uncomfortable in a way, but not in terms of it going out there, but in the content that is being published to the...
Whether or not it's necessary.
It's necessary, yes, and whether that would cause harm or it would cause good to the organization.
And there's also protection of data.
Of data as well.
Releasing private data. Yeah.
Yes, and as a country, we also are a country that needs to be respected in the true sense of it. And then maybe let me come to human beings. We've seen a lot of bullying when people decide to use the cell phone to fight their wars. We've seen people in a relationship, then, you see a child's photo being beamed there, and you can tell that the conversation is really, really gotten out of hand. And unfortunately, it is affecting the minor who has not consented to be in social media. And also we have seen cyberbullying, where people are using the internet to fight their wars. And the law itself seeks to protect the vulnerable ones. Right. I've spoken about the children. And in that context, we really welcome that piece of legislation. And since we are talking to people, it's just to give out a cautionary word to say, let us respect each other. Let us make sure that whatever we do, we don't use this good tool to humiliate other people. And also we've spoken about the privacy. It is also important. It's one of the rights that we got, jealously as a commission. And maybe at this time I'd leave to my educated expertise.
Well, before you get to it, because I would like for one of you to talk to us about that 3-test step in terms of how a right can be limited. But let's more so talk about the civic space. Now let's get into the NGO world, where we know that in perhaps across the continent and across the world, what governments are trying to do is stop illicit flow of funds. They're trying to stop the financing of terrorism. And this is particularly in line with the Financial Action Task Force. And there's recommendation 8 there that says NGOs, they need to operate within a legitimate and regulated framework. So I just want to hear from you what you think the role of the government is, and perhaps what do you think the role of civil society itself is in ensuring that they are regulating themselves, or whether the state is regulating them, or perhaps who should be doing the regulating of civil society, and what is the international sort of best practice when it comes to ensuring that we do not have our NGOs in the country being used as conduits to finance terrorism and being used as conduits to launder money?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the current context at which NGOs are operating in the country. So currently we do not have a comprehensive piece of legislation that will be taking care of that part. So as a result of that, we find that I can say the regulation is fragmented. So if you want to maybe start an NGO, so the practice that is obtaining is that these institutions, they are registered in terms of the Companies Act. I think it's Section 17, which allows the Registrar of Companies to register entities for charitable purposes or non-profit making purposes. So it ends there. So now when it comes to the mandates or the daily business of those NGOs, so the government, in a way, has no systematic way of making follow-up. You made mention of the illicit flows of finances. So yeah, now that is a gap. So currently, maybe on that one, it's normally at the instance of the financial institutions. If maybe they are seeing some suspicious transactions, then in terms of the prevention of money laundering, they undertake some certain procedures to flag that transaction. So, seeing that they are gaps in law and the NGOs are not maybe adequately regulated, so the government is in a process of developing a bill at this stage. That NGO bill is not in the public domain because it is being currently drafted, and it is drafted in consultation with various stakeholders. So maybe the advice that we may make at this point is that they should, the drafters, I think it's the government, the Attorney General, they should they should maybe take guidance from the model laws that are out there, that are being developed in the African Union domain or the United Nations, these two international organizations, they do have model laws on the regulations of NGOs. So what it emphasizes is that NGOs should be registered. So when it is registered, they also give out their purpose and objects of what they are set out to do. Another aspect of maybe the guidelines that you draw from those model laws is that they should have registered offices, meaning that they should have a principal place of business which is designated. And thirdly, on the elements, there is that aspect of membership. So in terms of the model laws, it requires that NGOs should disclose their membership of the members. So I think that on it all, it does contribute to this fight against illicit flows of finances as well as money laundering. Maybe I can hand it over to you.
I don't know who would want to take on that, because I think it's important that you should share this advice in ensuring that, you know, the drafting office at the Attorney General is making sure that it's learning from, you know, international best practices. But I would like to then ask, I mean, we are all aware of the ESGM case. What do you think then civil society can do to ensure that, forget about the drafting of the NGO bill, because we haven't seen that, it's still happening, but what should be the best practice, and what advice would you give to civil society in ensuring that, one, they are able to register and operate freely and fairly, and also, you know, understanding what Deputy Commissioner has spoken about in terms of limitations? What should we do as civil society to make sure that we're contributing to this conversation?
Okay, maybe if I may chip in, because we were talking about a legislation that is currently being developed. So maybe the most crucial thing, or the most maybe point that is standing out, is that once the bill has been made public, there is normally that stakeholder consultation process. So on that note, we do encourage the civil society to be vibrant, to be active. They should apply themselves when they are reading the provisions of that particular draft of that legislation. And they should also know the international standards that should be met. They should familiarize themselves with the model legislation that is on regulation of NGOs. So once they have this information, they are in a better place to make informed
contributions. It seems to me like you... go ahead.
Yes. Now, I was also saying that we also do, once the bill is out there, we have a role to play as the Commission in ensuring that that bill has taken a human rights-based approach. And obviously, we also take leave on what is happening in the international space. And we also do advocacy on as part of our mandate. So I think there's still a chance for us to actively participate. And maybe this would also be a time where we can actually invite NGOs, because we really appreciate the work that they do. In fact, it's not even about appreciation, it's the enrichment that those organizations have in the advancement of human rights in this country. And also the partnerships that we have with the civic organization or the NGOs, in terms of they do also act as human rights defenders, which is also what we are doing. But again, like we said in our opening remarks, it's sometimes not possible to be everywhere. Then it's maybe at the time of need, so they serve that purpose. I think that was just what I wanted to
right. I was going to say the conversation is segging into active citizenship, which is the final point I wanted to discuss with you. Active citizenship and democratic participation. 2024 has been a very interesting year all over the world. There's been elections almost everywhere. Some elections have been shocking, some have been exciting, some have been surprising. But it is what it is. It's democratic processes that must happen. I want for us to have a discussion around how, as citizens in the country, we can actually participate. I was reading the latest Afrobarometer, which suggests that, particularly amongst young people all over the continent, there is a decline in interest in democratic processes. People are no longer trusting democratic institutions. And we can see this by the voter turnout. We just had our very own elections in 2023, August, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not sure if the voter turnout numbers have been released yet, but we've been following all over the continent. People are not coming out to vote. I don't know if you would want to discuss that. How can we make sure that citizens are actually, engaged? They are going out to vote. Even after voting, they are constantly talking to their electorate. Even forget about parliament. At the constituency level, we were talking about decentralization as a policy of government, and I'm happy that the Human Rights Commission in itself is looking into decentralization. But how do we ensure that citizens are engaging with all of these institutions, from umphakathi to Tingundla to parliament?
Okay, we as a commission, we have a very keen interest, and especially when it comes to participation. Also, our constitution really gives the right for people to participate, and you've rightfully mentioned that we are using a decentralized method of political participation, which is through Tinkuja, which is quite unique, and everybody has a right to participate. Maybe just a brief background about what the commission does and what we did during the election is that we were able to be there to actually
Monitor.
not monitor. We were observing. We observed the elections, and yes, I see what I've seen the Afrobarometer response on report on youth participation, but we saw, in terms of registration, we saw high numbers, but then we also observed a slightly decrease when in the actual voting process. But it was quite encouraging for the country to see that they are taking interest in politics, and maybe they also want to participate. So our advice on that part is that really is to encourage, especially young people, to say, if you allow other people, nature allows no vacuum. If you allow people to come and act in your space, instead of being there, trying to have your voice heard, and by participating in meetings, how are we going to know, for instance, how the Tingunda system works? What are the things that needs to be improved? Or you are going to be a passive participant, listen to what other people experiences have been and what they think of Tingunda, without you being there to say, I know this works, this doesn't work. And as in Eswatini, this is what I can do to change the narrative or to change the political landscape. So basically, we would encourage young people, even older people, by the way, because this is not just young people. Even older people are not necessarily participating, but you must participate on something that is meaningful to you. You are Eswatini, there is no any other country that you are in. Then we utilize the time, the public space. You've been given time, raise your hand, say something that is going to build this country. Voice of dissatisfaction. But again, also we know some people as a Eswatini, we shy away from certain confrontational things that, when you hear someone raising their voice, you start feeling, you shy away and you become uncomfortable. So basically, and it will also come to what Mlonde said in terms of the formations, the groups coming in and actually articulating their position, doing proper research. With EEC these days has been doing public consultations, but when you go there, it must be meaningful. It must be relevant to to the issue in context. You can't just come in. We're talking about building a bridge, for instance. Then you come and you say you just want to start building an aeroplane because it's out of context.
It's no heart of the limitation.
Not necessarily, but you are being irrelevant. Next time you want to say something, no one will take you seriously, really. And also, we must do advocacy. You know, sometimes you know that I'm not good in public speaking, but I can, use this permission so that it can push my agenda. I can use my member of parliament to push my agenda. And also, yes, we spoke about digitalization, using the media online platform to get information and also to be able to articulate yourself. Then for now, that's what I can say, and I'm sure others can say something.
Thank you, Commissioner. Maybe one can add that elections are actually a human right. So, as the Commission, we safeguard, like the Commissioner said, generously for human rights. So, there is a right to vote and a right to be voted for according to the Constitution of our country. So, it's very important for citizens or the youth, like you have just pointed out, to actually exercise their right. And it's actually a platform to enhance democracy. Elections are platforms to enhance democracy. And so the time you go for elections and exercise your rights, you're actually enabling the system, or you're allowing that you be governed by the people that you wish for. So it's actually your will that will govern you, and you'll be able to make those people accountable to you. So we really encourage people to, especially the youth, to participate. And it is not only an issue that is peculiar to our context. In so many countries, depending on how they do their registration, but the registration numbers are very high compared to the participation itself, especially for the youth. So I do not know where the gap is in between the registration and the actual participation in the elections, but it is a gap that is actually worldwide. So for us is to encourage the youth to go there in their numbers and participate. And actually would love to see more youth being represented in these positions in parliament, in the councils, like you say, so that they are able to advance and protect against their wishes, wills, and their rights. So yes, as a commission, we really encourage that, and then the commissioner has said that our interest goes as far as observing the elections and writing a report, and also issue recommendations to actually enhance or improve the elections of the country. So we do expect that elections be conducted in a transparent manner and in a free manner and fair, so that at least we can be able to say the elections are a real representation of the will of the people, or what the citizens want. So we do look at issues of violence, non-discrimination, participation of the vulnerable or marginalized groups. So it's issues that we look into also when we observe the elections in the country. So you also pointed out on issues of how the citizenry or the youth can engage with the people that they've elected, be it MPs or the Dimvuna or Bukopo. We do encourage that after a person has been voted for, they shouldn't lose contact or engagement with the electorate. We really encourage that they should speak to their people, they should engage on issues that affect their people, so that they are able to bring them to parliament. So it is one way of ensuring that their voices are heard, is to engage with the people that they've actually voted for in their community or in Kongla level, to request them to take up their issues to parliament. So we do encourage that culture we promote that culture, and we just wish that both the electorate and their members of parliament and the team voters do that, so that they ensure that indeed they do represent the will of their people.
Okay, my contribution to the discussion would be that maybe I can make an emphasis on that. You asked the question earlier, that how can we make the youth to participate in these issues of elections and how they can meaningfully engage on these people that they've elected into public offices. So maybe the key intervention that can be made is that I know that the Elections and Boundaries Commission, they normally conduct civic voter education. So maybe the addition on this one would be that we know that we normally find the youth in social media. So maybe the mitigating measure that can be taken on this context is that those that are doing the civic voter education, they should not maybe focus only on going to the communities. They should also do some robust advocacy campaigns on social media. So on those campaigns, they should also maybe make those campaigns appealing. I'll make an example of this country that I'm not going to name. So I've noted that maybe in their elections, they normally use these campaigns that are normally couched in a language that the youth resonates with. Like, excel on your democracy, it's your democracy only. So yeah, it's catchy, I think, in my opinion. So once the youth, they see that there's that tagline that is catchy, so then they are going to be inclined to read what is contained there. Then on another thing, on the voter turnout, maybe it's something that the country needs to consider going forward, maybe on the next election cycle. So now there are some countries that are now conducting the elections using these digital platforms and these ICT tools. So maybe we should pilot this program whereby the youth, we know that the youth, we normally find them on their phones or internet or social media. So if maybe I believe that if this tool, voting tool, can be introduced whereby persons now are no longer going to go physically to the polling station, they are going to vote remotely on their gadgets. Maybe that.
I'm worried about that because people are going to run out of jobs if we're voting from home. But yeah, but on that, I think we've come to the end of our episode, and I hope this podcast and this episode particularly has been useful in educating, and I think it's been useful in empowering you as Swazis. Just remember, you have a right to vote. Go participate during the democratic processes, and particularly you have a right to express yourself. Though the Deputy Commissioner has warned that right has a limitation. My name is Melusis Melane, and I'm with the Southern Africa Litigation Center. This has been an initiative that has been supported by the USA Embassy in Babani.